A few months back, I found myself in the chair of a dermatologist. I had a bump on my head. I was concerned about it, didn't know what it was. Hopefully it wasn't a huge issue, but I was there. And this guy, he was great. He was in his late 70s, super nice, super friendly, super kind. He also broke all the rules. What do I mean? Well, he talked about politics. He talked about religion. He opened me up without gloves on. I had a lot that I could be concerned about, but I wasn't. Why? Well, because I liked him. In any other situation, you talk about politics, you talk about religion, you're dead, right? You open me up without gloves on, you're going to get a bad review. But he didn't. Why? Because I liked him. You see, he understood that it was about people. And if you're able to build relationships with people, have accomplishments with people, well, not only are you very happy, but you have a lot of happy customers as well. And you see they're more patient, they're more amiable, they're more flexible, they're easier to deal with. You see, as leaders, we've got to remember our most important asset. And no, it's not collections. It is not sales. And it is not closing more calls. It is your people. You see, our people need our leadership today more than ever. Why? Well, because of this touchscreen age, people skills have begun to erode. Not only have they begun to erode, but in some cases, they're not even developed. You have people that are lonelier than they've ever been. Baby boomers, 15% of them feel lonely. Gen Xers, 20% of them feel lonely. And even millennials, 30% of them are feeling lonely and feeling thoughts of despair and so on and so forth. So what do they need to be happy? Very simple. They need relationships and accomplishments. According to Stephen R. Covey, with those two things, they can develop a sense of fulfillment and they can be happy. So how do you do that? Well, you've got to create a purpose in your organization. All right, something that's bigger than any one individual, something that will motivate them regardless of what they're being paid, regardless of how long it takes, regardless of how hard it is to do the work. They do it. Why? Because this bigger purpose, that thing that's bigger than them and you, is driving them. You see, we have human needs. We have a need to be happy. We have a need to be confident. We have a need to feel brave. We have a need to feel worthy. We have a need to feel accepted. And with these needs, these emotional needs that drive us, we cave to tendencies. And that makes us unhappy. That makes us not confident in our abilities. We feel fearful instead of brave. We feel unworthy. We feel unaccepted. And these things happen over and over and over again. And we become lonelier and lonelier and feel more despair. And it's because we don't have some guiding principles that help us along the way, that help us to do right, as opposed to doing those things that aren't so right. You see, when we focus too much on ourselves, we have a tendency to let others down. Let me give you an example of human tendency. Last year, I was with my son and his wrestling team. It was this awesome run, team building experience. And Coach Garcia, he shows up with his two sons. And we're all pretty competitive. And so his sons were talking to my son and saying, hey, my dad can beat your dad. And guess what? It was on, right? What was supposed to be a run turned into a race between me and my son's coach. So it was really simple. Started out real slow. I had him lead the pack. I was in the back. I wanted to see his cadence and how far he was going. And then I made my move. I started running. Blitzing past all the kids, and I passed Garcia, got about 10 feet in front, and I started setting my own pace, thinking I got this, right? Next thing I know, Coach Garcia is right behind me, and the race is on. And I'm running up the hill, and he's running up the hill, and we're leaving all the kids in the dust, and we go down the other side. We come back the other way 5 miles later, 30 seconds. I beat him by 30 seconds, and I'm thinking, wow, man, I am the champ. And I look back around, and guess what? Where are the kids? They are nowhere to be found, right? They're all straggling, coming around the trail. We had to go back up, find out where some of them were. And I realized real quick that this was supposed to be a run. I wasn't racing for a gold medal. Of course, when I beat Coach Garcia, I felt like I won the gold medal for like 2 seconds. But afterwards, I realized, oh my gosh, this was supposed to be for my son. It was supposed to be about the team. And who did I make it about? That's right. I made it about me. Self-interest versus what's right. We are driven by our needs, our emotional needs. Because we're driven by those needs, we cave to emotional tendency. And when we do that, that's what creates the unhappiness. So what do? Well, we got to set the example for our team. We're the leaders. We're the ones that create the culture by the example that we set. So how do we do it? It's very simple. We focus in on moments. Moments that we can positively affect. Now, if we are focused on self-interest, guess what? Those moments, we won't even recognize them, let alone our ability to act in those moments. So we have to recognize them. And we need to figure out ways to make them meaningful for others. Now, how do you do that? Well, what we do is we apply this thing called truth. And so when you're talking about truth, that word truth, the meaning of it's been hijacked. You ever heard somebody say, hey, that person or this person here, this is their truth. And you know what? This is my truth, as if we own it. See, the problem there is that we don't own truth. Truth has been around long before we were born, and it's going to be around long after we're gone. And we don't create truth. All right, let me give you an example. Let's say that it's my truth that when I plant an apple seed in great soil and I water it and I make sure it has plenty of sun, that one day I'm going to have a beautiful peach tree. Well, that is, you know what? That's great. That may be your belief. But we know that when you plant an apple seed, very soon you're going to get a apple tree, not a peach tree, but an apple tree. You see, that's truth. We don't control that. We don't create that truth. We just discover it. That's it. So the cool thing about truth is that when you apply it and take care of it, right, you get the positive consequence. All right, that's what makes truth truth, is that there's a consequence attached to it. So we have to recognize the difference between truth and belief. You have a right to your belief. Truth is not yours. Truth in and of itself is absolute. So we need to recognize that. So when we do not apply truth, we have a tendency that we cave to and we get the unhappy result. But when we apply truth in our social network, we're able to create growth. We're able to create prosperity. When we do not, when we focus on self-interest and we make choices that help us instead of others, well, that's when we begin to consume growth and prosperity. So here's what happens as business owners. We read a lot of business books, trying to get better, trying to grow our business, trying to make things happen. And as we do that, what happens is we begin to wonder, okay, which of these should I apply? Which ones should I not apply? Let's say you're like Bill Gates and you're listening to a book a day or you're reading a book a day. That's fantastic. But how much of that book do you apply? In fact, if I were to ask Bill Gates, do you just apply everything in that book? Every behavior you learn in every book you read, you're applying. Chances are he's going to say, yeah, no way. It doesn't happen. Why? Because a study of behavior will never change your behavior. All right? It's just not effective. So what should we do instead? Well, a study of truth, okay? Study of truth changes everything. Why? Number one, there's a consequence that's attached to it. Okay? Either a happy consequence or a not so happy consequence. We recognize the consequence that occurs, and there's where we find our why. You find a lot of people asking why these days, especially our kids. Why, Dad? Why, Dad? You have to have a solution. You have to have an answer for that. It's not as simple as saying, oh, because I told you so. It just doesn't work today. You have to have an answer why. It is all about leading. It is all about salesmanship in the way that you lead. So the consequence answers the why, which is why truth is so powerful. All right? You get to choose. You don't get to choose consequence. Now that we're studying truth as opposed to studying behavior, that gives us the opportunity to not just change our behavior, but it'll actually change our very nature. And that is our goal, to take ourselves from where we are to where we want to be, our best selves. All right? It's leaving the old self behind. And that's what leaders need today. Why? Because according to Seth Godin, powerful author and speaker, people will remember what you did long after what you said is forgotten. That's right. You set the example for them. So it's about applying truth to overcome human tendency in order to create meaningful moments. Last year, I had the opportunity to run with my friends in a Spartan race. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Spartan races, so let me give you a quick idea. It's 13 miles of trail, 3,000 feet of elevation gain, at least, right? And you've got all these obstacles. You're climbing up ropes, you're carrying buckets of rocks up hills, you're going underneath barbed wire, you're throwing spears. It's an incredible event, right? So my friends and I, we planned to do this race. In fact, one of my friends, his name is Crandall, and he is, very tall and weighs 250 pounds. And you might think that he'd have a difficult time on a race like this. So he started training hard. He had a few months to prepare. He lost 40 pounds for the event. It was awesome, right? He was really engaged and pumped and ready to rock. Well, during the event, I promised them that as soon as I was done, because I was in a competitive heat and they were in an open heat, so they were about 2 hours after they were on the course about 2 hours after I started. And so I finished my race and I started looking for them. And I got to the 5 mile mark. And sure enough, I see Crandall coming right down through the trees. And so I said to him, hey, it's going to be great. You're at the 5 mile mark. You're going to go around this bend. And I'll meet you right back here at the 8 mile mark because it's a bit of a loop. And so he says, all right, sounds great. Well, 4 hours later, I meet him at that 8 mile mark. And he is shocked that I'm still there. In fact, he says, I cannot believe that you're still here. And I said, oh, I'm here. Let's go, baby. Let's get this done. And we start trucking up the hill and down the other side and going through all the obstacles. And it's about 7 o'clock at night. Can you imagine this? He has been on the field since 10:30 in the morning, and we're not getting done until 7 at night. And he is exhausted. But you know what? He's still upright, so he can still go. Sure enough, we get close to the finish line, and all of our friends are cheering for him, and he's got a huge smile on his face. And I'm like, yeah, baby, everybody finishes this thing. And we cross the finish line. He puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Brigham, I got to tell you something. I never planned to finish. I trained to go 8 miles and I planned to quit at 8 miles. Thank you for helping me finish. You see, last year, my goal was to get on the podium, and I did 10 Spartan races last year. And I trained my guts out. I wanted to podium. And twice I took fourth. And that was disappointing for me. In fact, during that very race, that was one of the times I took fourth. I was this close to getting on the podium. But when my friend Crandall put his hand on my shoulder and told me he did not plan to win, he did not plan to finish, that was a moment for me. That was a moment that I won. You see, I learned in that moment that it's not about winning that makes us happy. It's about how many you can bring to the finish line. I'm Brigham Dickinson. To learn more about indispensable leadership, go to powersellingpros.com.